This is a dirge sung traditionally once a year. بورعد أنا يونات خاب مصودا تخبخ موقش عني يا مرودا وبلي بنيها يوشبت قلمودا صعيكت أبي صعيكت أبي. Once upon a time, this particular melody was sung by thousands of Turkish Jews across the United States. In fact, during the 1910s and 20s, there were more than 20,000 Turkish Jews in New York City. According to one source, there were 27 Ottoman synagogues in Manhattan. And today, there are none. Okay, big deal. So there's no more good Italian bakeries left in the Bronx. No, hold on a second. The Ottoman Jews were different. Their ethno-religious culture was supposed to survive the melting pot. Okay, why were they supposed to survive? Let me give a little context. In the Middle Ages, 90% of the world's Jews lived in Spain. When the Jews were finally expelled from Spain in 1492, the centuries-old Judeo-Spanish culture was supposed to die. But no, it reinvented itself 10 times over as these Spanish exiles settled in various communities across the Mediterranean and the Middle East. The most important of these communities, of these Spanish exiles, were in the Western Ottoman Empire, in what is now Turkey, Greece, and the Balkans. Why were they so important? Because for more than 400 years, these Jews, these Spanish exiles, culturally dominated the rest of the Jewish communities of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. They produced rabbis, merchants, poets, and musicians. They also spoke a Jewish language called Ladino, which is really just a mix of Castilian Spanish and Hebrew. They were so prideful, so influential, that even communities that had no connection to Spain whatsoever eventually adopted their religious customs and even spoke Ladino. So you see that these people had a legacy of cultural survival. The culture survived the move from Spain to Turkey and grew and matured for the next 400 years. Why wouldn't it survive the move from Turkey to the US in the 20th century? Where did these Ottoman, these Judeo-Spanish, these Ladino-speaking Jews go? Why did their culture disappear? And I mean really disappear. There is almost no obvious trace of these Jews or their religious practices or their music or their food in present-day American Jewish society. Why didn't they survive the melting pot? I would say the answer is as sad as a dirge. Ladino culture was an ethno-religious culture. It would be dry if it lost its ethnic elements, such as language, food, and dress. At the same time, it would be pointless and lost if it lost its religious elements, such as rabbis and synagogues. In New York, what happened is that it lost its religious elements with each generation that couldn't read Hebrew and with each family that stopped observing the Sabbath. Slowly, the ethnic elements, the culture, disappeared as a result. But why was this so? Because there weren't enough religious leaders to transmit the culture to the next generation. Here is the story of the disintegration, the death of a beautiful culture. In the 1800s, the Jews in the Ottoman Empire became increasingly westernized. Many parents sent their children to modern institutions, such as the Jewish-French Alliance school system. As you can imagine, this had a huge cultural and economic impact. One often ignored result of the increased westernization of these Jews was that the younger generations rejected careers as rabbis and religious leaders. The rabbis didn't have any disciples. During the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913, as well as World War I and the famines, fires, and diseases that followed, many older rabbis died. Now there were fewer scholars to educate the younger generations. Most of the Ladino Jews who immigrated to the United States between did so between 1904 and 1924. And most of them were lower and middle class. They were religious people. They established synagogues and burial societies and charities and social clubs. They even had Ladino newspapers. However, nearly all of these organizations were led by lay people who had some sort of religious education. But most of the rabbis left in the Ottoman Empire didn't move to New York or to the United States. When they came, they established small religious schools to help transmit their culture and their religion to their children. But the lack of rabbis meant that there weren't enough religious schools or even enough qualified teachers. And the issue was that it only supplemented the children's education. The kids actually spent most of their time immersed in American culture because they went to public school. They had very little exposure to the Ladino culture of their parents and grandparents. It was no surprise then that by the second generation, people felt estranged and removed. Already by the 30s and 40s, religious schools began closing down, and less people attended synagogue services. Families moved to the suburbs. The culture was not reinventing itself. World War II was the final blow. The center of Ladino culture, the city of Salonika or Thessalonica, was decimated and most of its 70,000 Jews massacred. There was no new blood from the old country, no religious or cultural rejuvenation, and there were no more Ladino rabbis. By 1950, only 3 Ladino Jews had gone to rabbinical seminary in the United States. The last Turkish synagogues, closed in the 70s and 80s. 72% of second-generation Ladino Jews married non-Ladino partners. And, according to statistics, 90% of third- and fourth-generation Ladino Jews married non-Ladino partners. If there's anything that I've learned from my project, from my research, it is that cultures develop, mature, and die. The survival of any culture depends on how well it can reinvent itself over and over again. Where did the Ottoman, the Judeo-Spanish, the Ladino-speaking Jews go? Well, they didn't actually go anywhere. I can even think of 4 Stanford students, including a grad, who have some Ladino heritage. But where did the culture go? The culture died. The Ladino culture was unable to reinvent itself, to make itself relevant to the younger generations, to move with the times. And this is intimately connected to the fact that there weren't enough religious leaders, enough rabbis, to transmit the culture to the next generation. This dirge was written around the time of the expulsion from Spain. It laments the demise of Judeo-Spanish culture. Ironically, it was sung for the next 400 years by the same Jews, by those very Jews who kept the Judeo-Spanish culture alive. It is one of the remnants, one of the few remnants of Ladino culture in New York today. And it is only sung in 3 synagogues. Abi, 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 Yoshevet Galmuda, So'eket Abi, So'eket Abi. Thank you.